All right, so it's another Sunday morning. We are still working with white magic. If you're in the book, I'm really going to start around page 45 for a few minutes. And then we have some other things to discuss this time that are topics that we've chosen. And but basically where we were leaving off last time is we took a look at the different parts of the physical body, upper, lower body, you know, eyeballs, hearts, stomach, what they represent. And at the bottom of page 45, if you've got a hard copy, it says, it talks about the vital body. And so where all of the other was our physical parts, now we're talking about the vital body is the expression of the soul energy and has the following functions. It unifies and links into one whole the sum total of all forms. And it means all forms, okay? It gives to every form its particular quality, and this is due to the type of matter drawn into that particular part of the web of life, the position in the body of the planetary logos, for instance, of any specific form of which we have a position. We're walking around on the outer surface, right? For the most part, we're trying to fly. We're trying to get our way off of here. We're trying to, you know, make ourselves a boomerang that'll, boomerang from here to Mars and back, something like that, you know, making efforts. But basically we've been hoofing it across the surface of this planet. And the particular kingdom in nature, which is being vitalized, in other words, the vitality, he's talking about this vital link, the vital body. So, the vital body functions, bringing this forward to the particular kingdom in nature, which is being vitalized. And then number 3, it's a principle of integration and the cohesion force of manifestation from the strictly physical sense. This vital body is dealing with that. This web of life is the subjective analogy to the nervous system. And so we're now talking about the web of life of this planet of which we are on. And the beginners in the esoteric sciences can, if they remember this, picture to themselves a network of nerves and plexus running through the entire body, or the sum total of all forms, coordinating, linking, and producing an essential unity. And he's really talking about the planet here is all connected also. So within that unity is diversity. Just as the varied organs of the human body are interrelated by the ramification of the nervous system, so within the body of the planetary logos are the various kingdoms in nature and the multiplicity of forms. Back of the objective universe is the subtler sensitive body. One organism, not many, one sentient response, connected form. So he's implying here that the planet itself functions as one body, and it's got its network of nerves, so on and so forth, that runs through it all. And this sensitive form is not only that which responds to the environment, but it is a transmitter from inner sources of certain types of energy. And the object of the treatise might here be stated to be that of considering the various types of energy transmitted to the form in the human kingdom. That's us as we're walking around. In other words, he's talking about the planet itself and what it sends out and what we can pick up. And the responsiveness of the form to the types of force that affects that of the force upon man, and his gradual responsiveness to the force emanating, 1, So we should be picking this stuff up, and we've got the receivers for it because it's being transmitted from his environment plus his own outer physical body. He should be able to pick up from the emotional plane or the astral force, the mental plane or thought currents, the egoic force, that's a force only registered by man, and of which the fourth kingdom in nature is the custodian, and which has a mysterious and peculiar effects. And the type of energy which produces the concretion of ideas on the physical plane, and strictly spiritual energy or force from the plane of the monad. So all of those areas, there is information being transmitted to us. It's a matter of, are we picking it up? Are our receivers turned on and operational? And then can it get to us? And so those are actually valid questions. Because, you know, remember how we talked earlier about something being dense? Okay, well, that little monad, when it comes down the involutionary arc, it adds a veil every time it drops a plane. So by the time it's done, you've got this little divine spark of being that's now veiled with 7 veils, if you will, covering it, making it more difficult to really get to the source, if you will. And you have to build the transmitters on the way back up, also in the receiving. So anyway, I didn't say that quite right, but that's the bottom line is, as we evolve, our receivers should be turning on as we move up of that chart. And I'm trying to place this to some extent in that chart, in as much as that chart explains a lot of the various levels of this, if you will. The different types of force can all be registered in the human kingdom. So everything we did from A to F here, we have the capacity to be able to, we have the receiver, so we can receive it when it's being transmitted from the planet. Some of them can be registered in the subhuman kingdoms. And the apparatus of the vital body in man is so constructed that through its 3 objective manifestations, the triple nervous system, through the 7 major plexi, the lesser nerve ganglia, and the many thousands of nerves, the entire objective man can be responsible to the above mentioned types of force. That must be his A to F here. Energies generated in and emanating from any part of the planetary etheric web of life, of which I expect we're part, the solar web of life, the constellations of the zodiac, which appear to have a real effect upon our planet, and of which astrology is as yet the immature study, which I'm sure it is, but we do work with the basics, but we still kind of seem to be getting the gist when you get your chart, that something is being sent out, and obviously you're receiving it if you can identify with that chart reading or with those transits. You know, that's its own substantiation of its validity. Now there's certain cosmic forces which, it will be recognized later, play upon and produce changes in our solar system, and consequently upon our planet and upon all forms within that planetary life. And this has been touched on in Treatise on the Cosmic Fire, because that's more what Treatise on Cosmic Fire dealt with, rather than the individual human here. It dealt more with our interrelation with cosmic forces that are interplaying with us. And the solar system itself functions as one unit, one being, and the planets are the 7 chakras. So it's a larger man than we are. I don't remember which there's terminology, then there's the heavenly man, and so on and so forth. So I'm not sure which one it is that the solar system represents in terms of the terminology, but it's there. Now, to all of these, the planetary web of life is responsive. And when astrologers work in the occult way and consider the planetary horoscope, they will arrive more quickly at an understanding of the zodiacal and cosmic influences. And I think his esoteric astrology probably works pretty well with that, describing it. The anima mundi is that which lies back of the web of life. The latter is but the physical symbol of that universal soul. It's the outer visible sign of the inner reality, the concretion of the sensitive, responsive entity which links spirit and matter together. This entity we call the universal soul, the middle principle from the standpoint of the planetary life. Now, when we narrow the concept down to the human family and consider the individual man, we call it the mediating principle. For the soul of mankind is not only an entity linking spirit and matter, he mediates between the monad and the personality, but the soul of humanity has a unique function to perform in mediating between the higher three kingdoms in nature and the lower three. So when we talk about the soul of man is the link between spirit and matter, that is the job. In other words, when you get to the third initiation, when you worked your way to that point, you are bringing an integrated personality upward, which is the lower three. That is the mental, the emotional, and the physical. The personality you've been using, it all functions as one unit now. It comes up to the soul at that point, and then actually has a contact with it. The consciousness gets transferred over to this unit that's coming up from the bottom, and connects, then is able to connect with the spiritual triad, which connects you to the upper three on the chart. So that's where it is the mediator. It becomes, first of all, you have to make the little bridge over to the soul. That's the rainbow bridge, the anakarana, whatever terminology you want to use, which is dealt with in initiations, the raisin initiations. And then the next link would be, once there's been a union of the integrated personality coming to the soul, they make their union, then they're going to go to that physical permanent atom, which is up a couple more levels. It's on the top of the fifth, level 5. And that is the bottom link of the spiritual triad. And then there'll be an initial contact made with the permanent Bunut atom and the permanent Atmic atom. And you've completed the third initiation. You've just made connections at that point. You don't have all of that under your belt. It just built the little anakarana type bridge to each one of them. And then you'll probably go park for a long time. Well, all of this is the bodies are being built for you, filling in your own upper realms and processing. And he will indicate that once you move up much beyond that, any level of expansion you do does not benefit you personally anymore. It benefits the planet in total, in terms of your awareness and your awake and so on and so forth. And that would only be natural because your soul, the soul is gone. There's been the destruction of the causal body. It's no longer needed because you've got the direct connection. So there goes your ego. Okay. And up on that upper level, it doesn't matter. I mean, that's really where your consciousness is, if you will. And you're quite willing to share because you're now part of that whole unit in a way you were not down below. And you were still, I mean, that ego down here has just been working very hard. He says the ego is the initiate. That is the one that wants to be initiated. So you're working that ego and soul is working very hard to get its little appendage that it's incarnated to do some work down here, you know. So, I mean, I'm sure it'll give you all the kudos you want down here. Just anything to get you going to do the job and, you know, produce whatever the objective was of a given lifetime. So anyway, now that I went off on that tangent, where am I? The spiritual hierarchy? Yeah, the mediating principle. So the higher three are the spiritual hierarchy of our planet, nature spirits or angels and human spirits who stand at a particular point on the ladder of evolution. Of these, Sanat Kumara, it's the Lord of the world, embodying a principle of the planetary logos is the highest, and an initiate of the first degree is the lowest, with corresponding entities in what we call the angel or the Deva kingdom. There is the hierarchy of rays, concern groupings of 7 rays in relation to our planet. A hierarchy of lives gathered by an evolutionary process of our planetary evolution, and from 4 other planets who embody in themselves the purpose and the plan of the solar logos in relation to the 5 planets involved. In narrowing the concept down to the microcosm, the ego or the soul acts verily as the middle principle, connecting the hierarchy of monads with outer diversified forms, which they use sequentially in the process of gaining certain experiences resulting in acquired attributes, working out certain effects initiated in an earlier system. And we do have to remember we're never totally separate from an earlier system or any system we're in. We're always part of that. And cooperating in the plan of the solar logos in relation to his, if one may use a pronoun in speaking of a life which is an existence and yet is an extended concept, karma. So cooperating in the plan of the solar logos is in relationship to his karma, a point oft overlooked. This karma of his must be worked out through the method of incarnation and subsequent result of the incarnated energy upon the substance of the form. This is symbolized for us, if we could but grasp it, in the relation of the sun to the moon. The solar lord with his warmth and light galvanizes the morbid lunar lords into a spurious life. This is the great deception and the Maya of his presence. So runs the old commentary, oft quoted to me in earlier books. The above concept has in it truth for the individual soul likewise. So the middle principle is in process of revelation now. The lower aspect is functioning. The higher remains unknown, but that which links them and at the same time reveals the nature of the higher is on the verge of discovery. The structure, the mechanism is now ready and developed to its point of usefulness. The vital life can guide and motivate the machine is likewise present, and man can now intelligently use and control not only the machine, but the active principle. The great symbol of the soul in man is his vital or etheric body for the following reasons. It is the physical correspondence to the inner light body we call the soul body or the spiritual body. It is called the golden bowl in the Bible, and it's distinguished by its light quality, its rate of vibration, which synchronizes also with the development of the soul, its coherent force, linking and connecting every part of the body structure. It is the microcosmic web of life, for it underlies every part of the physical structure and has three purposes: to carry throughout the body of life principle the energy which produces activity. This it does through the medium of the blood, and the focal point for this is the distribution of the heart. It is the conveyor of physical vitality. It enables the soul or human yet spiritual man to be in rapport with his environment. This is carried through the medium of the entire nervous system, and the focal point of that activity is the brain. This is the seat of conscious receptivity, and it produces eventually through life and consciousness a radiant activity or manifestation of glory, which will make of each human being a center of activity for the distribution of light and attractive energy to others in the human kingdom, and through the human kingdom to the subhuman kingdoms. This is part of the plan of the planetary logos for the vitalizing and renewing of the vibration of those forms which we designate subhuman. So we also have a certain degree of responsibility and part to play with the kingdoms that are beneath us on that chart. This microcosmic symbol of the soul is not only underlies the entire physical structure and thus is a symbol of the anima mundi or the world soul, but is indivisible, coherent, and unified entity, therefore symbolizing the unity and the homogeneity of God. There are no separate organisms in it. It is simply a body of free-flowing force, that force being a blend or unification of two types of energy in varying qualities: the dynamic energy and attractive or magnetic energy. These two types characterize the universal soul, likewise the force of will and of love, or of Atma and Buddhi, and it is the play of these two forces on matter that attracts to the etheric body of all forms the needed physical atoms, and that having so attracted them by the will, forces drive them into certain activities. This coherent, unified body of light and energy is the symbol of the soul, in that it is within its 7 focal points, wherein the condensation, if it must be called, of the two blended energies is intensified. These correspond to the 7 focal points in the solar system, wherein the solar logos, through the 7 planetary logi, focuses his energies. These will be later elaborated. The point to be noted here is simply the symbolic nature of the etheric or the vital body, for it is by understanding the nature of the energies displayed, the unified nature of the form, the work that some idea as to the work of the soul, the middle principle in nature is grasped. So, I mean, we have a big job to do, you know, as humans, putting these two together. The symbolism is also carried forward when one remembers that the etheric body links the purely physical or dense body with the purely subtle and astral or emotional body. In this, it seems, the reflection of the soul in man, which links the 3 worlds corresponding to the solid, the liquid, and the gaseous aspects of a strictly physical body of man to the higher planes in the solar system, linking thus the mental to the Buddhic and the mind to the intuitional states of consciousness. And so that is the role we play. And I'm not sure how much we really consciously think about it in those terms, but it's what we're here for. And so I'm not going to go further with this because we've got some other stuff I want to cover today. I want to place some events on that chart for everybody to think about. And part of it is Tom had it's your wife's father who died, correct?
Correct. Yes, my father-in-law passed away a couple Mondays ago.
Yeah. And you had a beautiful poem, which I think Donnie sent out, but I would like you to go over that. And then we're going to talk a little bit about a couple of things. First of all, when we talked about each sense, and then we have the sub-levels, some of those get developed, and some people, it's kind of proof or an example of that development, that they do have interactions with people who have probably just recently passed. I mean, the ones we're going to talk about are, at least. And so I want to talk a little bit about that, and then we'll look at the chart and place where we get parked or where we go during at various stages of our development, depending upon that evolution, as to when we're not here, when we've ditched a form and it's gone. Well, yeah, it goes to the ash pile now for the most part, but the soul and that divine spark doesn't die. So we figure out where it happens to land on the chart, depending upon the evolutionary state. And we'll take a look at that. But so in fact, I'll start it out this way. When I was a lot younger, reading this stuff, and I got to the part where he's talking about, it was World War II, and Shambhala makes choices of whether they're going to help avert some pattern that's coming to the planet, or whether they're going to let it be. And they decided they would let World War II occur, figuring we could handle it and so on and so forth. And I'm sitting here thinking, who the hell are you to decide what we're going to experience down here? You know, and the indication was, the reason they looked at it that way was because they understood that nobody dies. The essence of who they are, that divine little spark, does not die. You just shed the form, and you're back parked again up in that soul realm, or wherever you're going. And so that it was to break up a lot of old forms. And they blew up most of Europe, right? All the old structures, the physical buildings, everything that was holding all those old patterns in place, and help sustain the old structures of Europe that were very stratified in comparison with what's out there today. And they were de-stratified again in the 60s with that descent. I'm sure that was a descent of the Christ consciousness that just came down to the astral. It couldn't come any closer, and the humans couldn't, frankly, have handled it. They were having hard enough time handling that, because it was breaking up the stratification of all those ranks, and who you associated with, who you didn't associate with. So anyway, but that was where the first time I really was looking at this was his remarks about that decision being made, and Shambhala was the one that made it. So anyway, but now I think we better understand, or at least a number of people better understand, that we just do lose the form, but the essence of who we are is still there. So sometimes, especially if you're around loved ones and there's a loss, you can have some substantiation of that awareness somehow by event patterns that happen. But I'm going to turn it over to Tom now for this was last week, wasn't it? The fully.
Yeah, the funeral was last week, correct.
So anyway, it's over to you for a while.
Thank you. Donnie, can you throw the poem graphic up on the screen? Thank you, sir. So this is a poem that was actually on my father-in-law's, the little cards they put out in the funerals when you go to the funeral home. It's by Mary Elizabeth Fry, although I have to throw a disclaimer out there. I tried doing a little bit of research on her and didn't find much, except there's a whole bunch of other poems that look quite similar to this that have been written by other people, just with some different words. But anyway, the point is what it stands for when I read it out, and what it means. But what it says, and I have to give some credit to my wife too. The picture in the background is a picture she took up at the family's camp on Lake Ontario. I thought it was fitting to use it since my father-in-law loved to go there. He was an avid outdoorsman, so I thought it was fitting to use that picture in this. And it's pretty, anyway. So the poem goes: do not stand at my grave and weep. I am not there. I do not sleep. I am 1,000 winds that blow. I am the diamond glint on snow. I am the sun on ripened grain. I am the gentle autumn rain. When you awake in the morning hush, I am the swift, uplifting rush of quiet birds in circling flight. I am the soft starlight at night. Do not stand at my grave and cry. I am not there. I did not die. And so I think that throws out a lot of the points we've been talking about. That what we perceive as the end really isn't the end. That divine spark continues on. And I'd like to share a little story to kind of add some proof behind that, or at least for me. I was meditating actually under the lunar eclipse last week. And as I was meditating, I had a vision come in of my father-in-law, probably a little bit younger than he was when he passed, because he was joyful, he was happy, he was healthy. He looked good. He had his big beard and mustache, and he was riding this big white-walled tire, old school red bike. And my wife told me he actually had a red bike back in the day that he used to ride around everywhere. But he was just gleefully, joyfully riding it around. And then he turned to me and looked at me, and I looked at him, and then he kind of gave me his signature giggle. And as soon as he did that, he was gone in a flash. The vision was gone, and I came out of my meditation, and off to my left, rustling in the hedge right next to me where I was meditating, was a skunk. So it was like my father-in-law came into my world to let me know, you better get the hell back inside, because you're about to get sprayed by a skunk, and you're one of my pallbearers tomorrow, so I don't want you to stink. So I just thought it was a little neat story to share associated with that. But it kind of proves, I think, that divine spark exists, because he found his way to come communicate with me, or at least that's what my belief is. And he gave me a little bit of warning that, there was a little bit of danger headed my way, so you might want to shift course and go inside. So.
But let's talk about now back a ways. Who was it earlier in your past that came in a dream to communicate to?
Yes. So my uncle, I don't remember exactly when, it was a while back. When I was going through my MBA program, my uncle had passed. He was taken tragically from us quite suddenly in a pretty bad car accident. And then when we got the call, my father and I rushed up to Connecticut to be with my aunt and help her out. And she couldn't sleep in their bedroom anymore, so they gave the bedroom up to me while I was there. I slept in the bed, and that night I had a dream, and my uncle came to me. Now, I didn't have a visual of him, but he was there. There were no words spoken, but I could feel him. And he passed me a message, although not verbally, but the message I got was to tell my aunt that everything was going to be okay. He was fine, and kind of like life goes on type of thing. And so, yeah, that was another example of that, divine spark that continues on. And for some reason, he chose me to pass that message along to my aunt, which I did. and she appreciated it. So is that the story you were referring to, Carla?
That was the one you had told me, yes. And
Yeah.
sometimes people can be reached easier than other people.
Mm-hmm.
And, you might happen to be one of them.
I would say that having it happen twice, probably so.
Anybody else got any experiences or memories of such? Silence is golden here. Well, I can give you one or two. If you'd like to hear my when my father died, and it was in 2001. And actually I'm one of two children, and my sister is about 5 years younger than me. And I don't know if you've ever seen these. There was a program, evidently there's a classic syndrome. It's the second one who says, he gives the first one the calls, because the first one's probably gone off somewhere else to live and do something. If you want to see your mother or father alive again, you have to come home right now. I got those kind of calls from her. And I said, look, and I don't know when this was earlier. I said, one of them is going to die in 1995 and the other one's going to die in 2001. So I'm not coming back there right now. It was before 1995. And for some reason I had a sense of when they were going to go. That was just my response to her. And it was true. My mother died in 1995 and my dad in 2001. So, and I had gone home to see my mother about 6 months prior, because I had the time when I could do it then. And then, and I was gone in the hospital. She just didn't come out. It was not expected, but she didn't come out. So my sister, and I'm planning to go to the funeral, of course, and I'm gonna fly there at that point in time. And but I'm on the phone with my sister beforehand. My mother's already died. In fact, hospital probably really screwed up initially. So they put her back on life support with her lungs or whatever it was. And she died again on them before they could have to decide. My sister and my dad would have had to decide whether to pull the life support or not. And it was, luckily she died again, even on life support. So, I mean, she was leaving, the point being. So I'm talking to my sister a day or so later, and because I have to fly out at a given time, which was a day or so after that. And she says, mother is here. She's still waiting for you. She's not leaving. She's waiting. I said, well, what is she waiting for? Anyway, because she thinks she ruined your life. And I said, well, we had that conversation 30 years ago, and I told her just forget it then. And well, she can't forget it. So I said, all right, I'll take care of that. And so you don't have any trouble finding someone. I mean, if you can move in these realms, you don't have any trouble finding where that entity is. There's just an automatic connection. You want to go there, you're there. Okay. Because my sister asked me later, where did you find her? Was she still in the hospital? Well, and it isn't really like that. You're just going to find them wherever they are. And so I basically let her know that there wasn't any way she could possibly have ruined my life. It's, I kind of stripped down to the little divine spark, so to speak, and said, here, look, you can't destroy this. Okay, you're not powerful enough, so don't take that on. It's just a guilt trip you don't need. And then I helped her pass over, handed her to some guides that were waiting there for her to pass over. And I watched as they moved away, and all of her, she had a miserable life. Okay, from the time she was born till she died. And I saw all that just fall away from her as she went on. But I did tell her beforehand, you cannot come back. Okay. You are going to be passed over, but you cannot come back here. You have the three of us, my sister, my dad, and I, we need to be able to live our own lives now. Okay. And we need this time. So you cannot come back. That's the only thing you got to realize is that's a no-no. And so about 5 years later, and it was, I think, at the anniversary of her death, my sister called, and I told my sister that story, so she knew it, but we didn't tell anybody else, of course. And my sister's daughter was my mother's favorite granddaughter, and she should have been. There was a good affinity there, and so on and so forth. So my sister calls me up. She says, Mom came down to visit Brandy. It was probably yesterday. That was the daughter. And yeah, she just popped in, but she says, I can't stay long. I have to go. Is what my mother said. She said, I can't be here long. I have to go. And so my sister and I laughed about it because Brandy did not know that story. Okay. Nobody knew that story but the two of us. But my niece said, oh, that's what she said. She said, I'm just here for a minute. I can't stay long. So anyway, I mean, that kind of story is rather interesting in as much as, but she needed help crossing over. And the thing about it was there wasn't anybody there for her to meet her. Normally there is. Okay. There will be someone. In fact, my mentor, every once in a while, because I was close to her until she died, closer to the end, she had a very good friend, Mary, that was real close with her, and she would feel Mary around every once in a while, closer to the end, and was wondering if she was coming and waiting to help her cross over. I don't know that was the case when it actually happened, but I then became aware that generally somebody comes to help you cross over. So, and there wasn't anybody from my mother. All the connections from childhood and all of that she was adopted for starters. So, her mother didn't want anything to do with her, and reiterated much later in life, she still didn't want anything to do with her. So, so as it went, she probably needed somebody to help her cross over, or she would have been hanging around a lot longer. Okay. But now, before I go any further, anybody else got things in their memories of events like this that Melinda? No? Okay. Donnie? You have friends?
Nothing on the top of my head, no.
Okay. Well, would you like to hear another one?
Sure.
When
Yes.
when my father died, and again, it was fall, it was the fall of 2000, and I was talking with a friend of mine, and I said, look, because I was coming down to Mexico. I said, I'm coming back because in early January, I'm driving to Minnesota. And I said, I would not be driving there this time of year, but I have to go. And that's the only thing I said to her. So the trip was already planned 3 months in advance. I came back for Christmas, and then left in early January for Minnesota, and it's snow roads, you know, I'm up going through Salt Lake, across Wyoming, up the Dakotas and over to Minnesota. So it would not necessarily be my choice of traveling. I've done it before, but it wouldn't be my choice. And at the time that probably right about the time I was leaving, he went into the hospital. My sister told me he went into the hospital, and it was, it was diarrhea. They couldn't get rid of it at this point in time. He's 82 years old at the time, I believe. And that's what he was in the hospital for. But it wasn't necessarily considered life-threatening, you know, if they found a solution or whatever. So anyway, I'm driving, but I'm calling her every so often. And in this material, it will tell you that the soul will sound a note. And when the soul sounds the note, it's drawing you back in. This life will be winding up. Okay. It can be a few days, or he says it can be months, or he said it even could be years, but generally the note sounds. And the only thing I can say to you is I saw that. It isn't a matter of hearing it. That would have been devastating probably to me or whoever else. But I saw that note sound. I see things probably more than hear or whatever. And it's a different kind of seeing. There isn't any other word to put with it. But when I was somewhere in Wyoming, I think at the time, and I saw that thing come down, and I knew what it was. And so the next time when I talked to my sister, she says, you know, and at this point he had he was in the hospital. He's got his bed. He's got the little portable potty right there. So my sister said, well, you know, he will get up. When he does, his temperature drops like to 95 right away. And when he gets back in bed, it'll take about 45 minutes for that temperature to come back up. And somehow there's a sound, you know. And I said, well, look, Robin, he's leaving. His etheric body is pulling away from his physical body. And so when he gets up, it has to, you know, it's out of alignment. And then he'll get back in bed and it'll settle in again, and he'll get back to regular 98.6 temperature. But I said, that's what's happening. And so I get home, it's another day and a half drive or whatever. And I don't catch her right away, but I do stop at the hospital and I see my dad, and he's fine. He's there. He's lucid. He never lost any degree of awareness or consciousness. You know, he was fully all there. And then I'm off to try to get some sleep, and I don't know where my sister was. I went to her house or whatever, and so that was Saturday night. On Sunday we went up to see him. He was we saw him in the afternoon, part of the afternoon. We stopped to have they love Chinese food, so my brother-in-law and my sister. So we had food. It was time to drive back home. We're 20 minutes from wherever we live. And she calls him on the phone and says, do you want us to come back? She turned it. First of all, I'm sitting right behind her in the car. Her husband's driving. Nobody's in the seat next to me. But she turns around and she looks really strange. And then she looks back. And I don't know if that's when she called my dad. And she said, do you want us to stop? He said, no, that's okay. That's classic my dad. And so we go home. And I was up late that night, considering I'd had a long drive just the day before. And at about 11:30 at night, I remember saying to him, I said, no, it's okay. If you're ready to go, it's fine with me. I've seen you. you know, we've connected again and it's okay. So about 1:40, I get a phone call from my sister, maybe at 2 o'clock. And the hospital had called her and told her that he passed away at 1:40. And then the question was, do we want to go up and check him out at night? It's only 20 minutes away, or do it during the day. We decided we'd go at night. We'd go back and take care of all the paperwork and everything because it's easier. And so she's in the car and she's really upset. She's crying. I should have known, da 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 da, you know, and nobody was kinder to my dad than my sister. They were a really good match and she took care of him. She kept him alive as long as she possibly could. She would still have him alive today if she could. You know, they have a great bond and it's wonderful. And she was upset and crying. And I said, Robin, he knows you loved him. I should have gone back there. I should have gone back to the hospital. And I said, you know, he knows you love him, blah, 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 blah. And she says, no. She said, when I turned and looked, the figure of death was sitting next to you in the back seat, and I should have known. That was what she was talking about. In other words, I should have known that meant he was going to die or something, but she didn't compute it that way. And there was nothing I could say for that. That one she had to work out herself, which she did as time went on. So then I came back to the house about 4:30 and my dad came back at 6:30. And this was the house he'd lived in all the time. I was sleeping in the room where I grew up, in the bed probably that either I had or my sister had, whichever one was left. We had little twin beds. And but he came back about 6:30 and I could tell because I could feel the warmth of him. I couldn't see him, but I knew he was there. Okay. So my sister's daughter, the favorite granddaughter, came down in the middle of the day. They had to drive in from South Dakota, I think. And we were talking and I said, look, I said, Dad's over there, just go over at the house. I was going somewhere else to another little town to visit somebody. I said, but he's over there, go, you know, the doors open or the keys there or whatever it was. And so when I came back and saw her, she said, yes, she said, you're right, he is there. Because she could tell, she could also feel it. She could feel that warmth because he was definitely there. Then the time comes for the showing, which must have been another full day, I expect, later. And he was not at the showing. He was not at the viewing for his funeral. Okay. And then the following day was going to be the funeral. So we had an aunt and her daughter come down from Iowa to us. They came part way up to, I think the border was South Dakota or something. And then they came up the rest of the way the day of the funeral. So she's talking when they get up there about, and they had stopped and there was a casino at wherever they stayed, right at the South Dakota border or something. I think South Dakota the Indians have casinos there. And so when she comes in, she says that they had stopped and she had won a bunch of money, a lot of money. And she said, I thanked Art, that's my dad's name, because he was right behind me when I won. I mean, she got like $4,000 or $5,000 at that point in time. And her daughter probably picked up another couple thousand, you know. So I knew where my dad was when the viewing was on. He was down with my aunt, which you would have no trouble connecting with her. It just doesn't when you're, and he never liked to go within 20 miles of home. But I think he found out now he could go anywhere. He didn't have to drive. And he was just like there. So anyway, that came up, and I'm not surprised because he liked to play cards, and and so on and so forth. So that was perfect for him. And so he was around us all the time. He was, when everybody was at my sister's house, after the funeral, he was there, and I did see him cross over. There was someone there to get him, and I knew exactly when he crossed over. I'm aware of those things, I guess. And I believe it was, in his case, it was a friend from the war that he had a real close friendship with. So much so that he actually kept sending Christmas cards back and forth, and he didn't do things like that. But there always had to be that letter of correspondence with this guy. And we didn't have telephones where you could just talk to somebody for no charge. So, most of his life. So it wasn't that he would be calling all the time, but there would be some letters back and forth. So, that was that. And plus some other, my sister was very aware of where he was. And because I said, well, he joined us for that. She says, you mean when I went out and opened the door, because he knocked, because he's still too polite to ever come into my house without knocking at the door first. And I went and opened the door so he could come in, kind of thing. I mean, it's just awareness like that. But our family kind of lives like that, my sister and I. And she has the ability to detect, generally before they're going to happen, large earthquakes or big airplane crashes or something like that. That's within her radar. And for some reason, she had an awareness that I had no clue of. I mean, we live in a town of 1,600 people, and she had an event pattern happen that was not a real positive one in terms of being nice. And she says, yeah, but she says, I know why that happened. And she says that such and such back in my history, she was in Egypt, I guess. And she said, and I did such and such, and that's why this happened this time. And I'm looking at her and I'm thinking, where the hell did you get that? This little town here, you couldn't possibly have anything that would stimulate that idea in your head. But anyway, and she probably was right. And actually, I think the whomever from Egypt found her and married her. And because I said to her at one point, I said, Mother said you were going to divorce at such and such a time, whatever. And I said, so are you going to keep him or not? Because that didn't happen. She didn't look like she was getting ready to part with him. And she says, no, I felt sorry for him then, and I feel sorry for him now. So I'm keeping him. And that was just, I'm going to take care of him. And she did. She took care of him to the day he died. And yeah, so anyway, those kinds of scenarios are commonplace, I guess, for my family, or awareness of that. And I lost a grandson not that long ago, probably 4 or 5 years ago. And 17, it was an accident, and totally unexpected. So when the family got together, this was my oldest son's child, and the close-knit family got together, and they had asked me what I would suggest they do. And I said, well, because this was an accident, this is not something he anticipated. He has to be feeling, and he can see everybody here who's just devastated. I said, I would send him all the love you have, because he has to be feeling really bad. He has to be, rather than having him harbor guilt or trying to hang on, so on and so forth. If everybody just gives them all the love they can, that would be the best thing to do at this point in time, and which they embraced, that was the thing to do. So I think he had a better send away, and it was quick. He didn't linger here. And his grandfather on his mother's side came to get him. And actually I could feel, I knew his grandfather, and the presence, the essence of his presence, I don't see a form or figure. I don't mean that. Just the vitality and essence of that presence was right there with me for a couple of minutes. And I knew he had come to help take his grandson to cross over. And everything was cleaned up on that one. I mean, he did not linger. And one might have thought under a circumstance like that, you kind of hang around. But I think it was probably the love and the caring that allowed him to move on, because he knows they'll be together again anyway. Grandpa comes, that's part of the family. The rest of the family will eventually end up together also. So. Oh, the sand dollars. Yeah, this is the impressive one. This young man was really, really well loved by a lot of people, and he had the capacity to really love people. Okay. So, anyway, his part of the relatives were coming from Utah down to San Diego County. And they stopped evidently at a spot, and they'd made this trip, all of them together, because it was his cousin and parents. And they made this trip together a number of times in his lifetime. And I think there was a beach they would stop at. And it was a beach where there were a lot of sand dollars, evidently. And so they stopped, they walked along the beach. And during this period of time, in 3 different occasions with 3 different people that they did not know came up to him with a sand dollar and said, "I'm supposed to give you this." 3 separate people. For there might have been 3 of them for all I know. Anyway, there was 3 different times during that period of time. And that was their way for my grandson to let them know he was there. He was okay. He was with them. So the odds of that would be incredible, to randomly have something like that happen. Yeah. So sometimes those levels of awareness, and the reason I'm trying to bring some of this back is to coincide with this. When we talk about the senses we have, we talk about there's 5 sub-levels for each of our senses, that when those start to operate and we become aware of them, then what they're talking about here in terms of all this information is there. It's none of it is held back from us, other than our sensory apparatuses are not able to tune into it. When they are developed, then just like it says, this planet has all that information available, and your body ultimately has the ability to read it all if it was fully consciously developed. That's what we're growing into. That's where we're going. And some people are super psychic, so they pick up their information in that way. There's other people who I do not believe the people who are off their rocker hearing voices and have to be incarcerated and stuff are there. I've had businesses that have been curbside businesses, and I hear some of the homeless walking early in the morning and having a very strong dialogue. And those dialogues, actually, they're generally about one of two things. It's politics or it's religion. And they're very tightly, logically, this dialogue is going on. That to me is something different. Okay. They're counterbalancing an argument within their head, and they happen to be verbalizing it. And they're probably stuck there. Okay. So they don't move on and join the realm of us everyday people anymore. They're right there. But there are voices, audible voices, that some people do hear, probably not that often under normal circumstances when there needs to be something communicated. But you've got all these senses. They're just here. You've got everything you need in your physical body to take this journey through consciousness that we're talking about here. And most people don't know it. I mean, you get into physics of consciousness and you find out how we create consciousness. And we create the consciousness we have. We are a machine that walks around that creates consciousness. I mean, and if one does finally become aware of that, then there should be some responsibility to recognize what you do and realize what you are and your position and your role on this planet. You turned out the lights, Donnie.
I think the clouds came over, actually.
Oh. Any comments from anybody here, guys? Is that supposed to be dead silence? Hello, Corey.
He's on mute.
I know he is. I just didn't know if he'd unmuted or not. Oh, you know, I looked at there's a book that DK has called Glamour. I think it's a little one. It's a little thing, like, well, it disappears, right? Anyway, and I thought about that, and I thought, you know, our real glamour is we think that we are what we're looking at. In other words, when we look in the mirror and we think we're what we're looking at, and we're really dressed up in 7 veils, so to speak. And on the way down, we dress up, and on the way back up, we unveil ourselves in that regard. But the real glamour, and he does point out the greatest part of our glamour is we do think we are what we see in the mirror when we look. And because he talks about the illusions and how the brain creates that. And even with your twin dimensions creating time and space, is we create that illusion. We read light, our eye reads it, it translates it into whatever we're seeing. And I think that's one of the points that he makes in Glamour, is that we don't understand that we are something totally different than what we see in essence. So that is probably one of the biggest glamours of all, but part of that is being stripped away by science, which tells, which now at least allows us to better understand that we read light and it translates into what we see around us. But that doesn't necessarily mean that's exactly what's there. And certainly that this is not the essence of what we are. Is yesterday's meal and the day before's and so on and so forth.
You said you were going to correlate that to the chart, maybe? Did you want me to put, you want me to get that ready?
Yeah, let's do that. That would be good.
I have to find it.
Okay. Okay. So as long as we're talking about coming and going, when we leave, and if we're still functioning in the lower 3 dimensions and haven't made any connections to the upper ones, then we go to where that teeny little triangle is. That is the soul. That's where we go back to. Our little divine spark, so to speak. That's where it's deposited. And sometimes they'll talk about it being, I think he talks about it wrapped up in a golden, somehow a little golden ball or something to that effect. Now, if for some reason one has made it through the 5 initiations, but you've still kept a body, for example, then when you would leave that body down here in these realms where you've been living, you would go up to that middle triangle in the middle, whichever point you were working on. In other words, either the Buddhic plane, the or the Atmic plane, because that's where the hierarchy is. That's where the ashrams are. So wherever you fit in that hierarchical set of ashrams is where you would go back to. Now, if you had made it all the way up to the top, which I believe then is your 7th initiation, you would be up there, and then it's a matter of moving out onto some other pathway that's not within our solar system, of which you would have gotten choices at level number 6 of, okay, where do you want to go? And then the preparation starts to make that transition, which evidently takes a long time. And this whole journey I'm talking about is nothing is fast about it. It takes a very long time. It's highly calibrated wherever you are, wherever you're meant to be is where you are. You get into the wrong place, and believe me, you get booted out very quickly. And it's just a matter of vibration, and I can tell you that from experience, because I know, so it's nothing you can take personally, but I mean, you just don't end up anywhere that you don't belong. So but a lot of times what happens is you end up there just to make the initial contact. And so you're not going to be there long, but then you go back to whatever level you were. and keep going, but there's developmental phases that happen in the background. And if you're in a body down here with the brain we have, which is sorely lacking in terms of being able to register anything that's going on up in that upper level triad up there. You know, you're not aware of it. There can be activity up there that's related to you, but you won't have a clue. It's just the way it is. You know, we're like, you know, I go back to a compact computer or something, figure out trying to operate through that. And that's about where our brain is related relative to the upper levels that are there. You're just not, he just says you're just not aware of it. It's going on, but you have no clue. So we park where the soul is until we've got an evolutionary state that has brought us up to that middle triangle. And then if for some reason you're down here with the body, but you've advanced to that stage, when you get done, that's where you would go. Is any questions about that stuff? No question. Donnie, hasn't something ever happened to you? Aren't you aware of anybody? You've lost a lot of people in your life with your jobs.
As far as
Being aware of stuff.
this chart,
No, I'm just talking about, you know, sometimes you pick up information afterwards, or you're aware of somebody who's not around.
I don't recall. I mean,
Okay.
I haven't had a lot of death in my life, to be honest with you. I've been,
Yeah.
it's been a long time since anybody really close to me has passed, and or I haven't been around, because just traveling, we left the family, and when people have passed, I haven't been anywhere near them or the family, honestly.
Yeah, but haven't you been in war?
Yeah, but when I saw the when I was around that, there was nobody there at all whatsoever. It was just nothingness, to be honest with you. I didn't even feel anything looking at it at them.
Okay.
Which is I don't know if that's the state that that I was in or whatnot, but when I saw them, the corpses or whatever, that's all it was when I was looking at them.
Well, there's nobody home at that point.
Yeah, so it wasn't anything that was not for me. Now, I'm sure there were lots of experiences for other guys, certainly, that were closer to the time and the events. But when I had, by the time I had gotten there, there was nothing there.
Okay.
I'm sure Bull and, others might have other stories for sure. And like I said, I think I had told you once before, I had not had anybody close to me pass either. No friendlies or anything like that. I was very fortunate in that case.
Yeah. Bull,
Mm-hmm.
any comments? Anything to add?
So, yeah, when we would this is going back to some worse stuff or whatever, we would have, you know, as soon as all the, you know, troops in contact, or you know, as soon as our mission was at a point where all of the bad guys were neutralized, we go in, do a thing called SSE, which is sensitive site exploitation. Basically, you're trying to find any intel left on the objective, or computers or phones or whatever. So there was a couple big ones where there was a lot of bad guys, and they were either dead or in the process of going. And this would have been probably after about a 3-day solid, you know, on and off fighting. This would have been in Iraq. And so we would go through, and as we're looking for all the stuff, you know, we had, of course, one of our, you know, guys, you know, has a camera and, you know, taking pictures of all this stuff so they can put it into their back brief up, because it was a pretty big deal. You know, like you had to kind of storyboard everything out. Go through each of the, you know, like enemy KIA, pull whatever, you know, stuff, try to figure out if they had ID cards, any other, you know, kind of stuff like that. So we'd find this stuff, but there was a very distinct feeling, smell, you know. It's like it was like it almost crossed over into various, you know, senses that, you know, like we have. So it was almost like you know how people say it smelled like death, or it felt like death. Like that was like the best I can describe it would have been like there was like a low hum, and then there was it was like super, it was like acid static is the best, that's the best like description. It's like acid staticky with a low hum, going, you know, through everything, you know, through all the you know, KA dudes, and then just going through that whole area, like something had like descended down upon it and was cleaning everything out. And, you know, I don't know if it, you know, it was taking, you know, like everybody away to where they had to go, or, you know, like what it was, but it was a very distinctive, I mean, it wasn't like scary or anything, because, you know, like nobody's home and those kind of guys, but it was just a distinct, you know, sensory experience. So it's like, you know, like you could tell that, you know, death was in that area, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, there's just a recognition that that's what this is. But I would think, yes, if you're around it much, you're going to somehow become sensitive to it.
Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, like when you're in the moment, you're pretty much, it's, you know, like you go pretty much like how I would, you know, like a paramedic would go on like a really bad scene. They just go into, you know, like work mode to get things done. But that's one thing that, you know, knew as soon as you went in, after everything had kind of calmed down a little bit, that was the, I guess what like the senses were. And some of the other guys were like, yeah, I'm going to go back to the truck. This is crazy, you know. And it wasn't because they weren't used to seeing bodies or whatever. They were just like, yeah, this is like, this feels weird. Okay.
Yeah. I see you moving your head up and down, Tom.
Well, I just got thinking about going back to my father-in-law's funeral. So at the funeral, I felt nothing, like I could feel no presence or anything like that. But my wife and her sisters, and they talked about this afterwards because it kind of happened to each of them independently, but they all said, well, my wife told me that when she was looking up at her father in the casket, it almost looked like he was still breathing. But she didn't say anything at the time because she was like, well, it's maybe just my mind playing tricks on me. But then she'd let her one sister know, and her eyes just like lit up, and she was like, you saw that too. And then her other sister had the same thing happen. I'm just wondering, could that be something similar to what we're talking about here? Because obviously his chest wasn't moving. But all three of them independently thought they saw that, like it looked like he was still breathing, type of thing.
Yeah, and it may well be that that was their some level of communication or ability to see that, even though it wasn't necessarily occurring. But
Right.
but we should be getting into a realm where we better understand that it's transitory. I think there's enough people out there across the board who have some experiences now, especially with a loved one or something, that that isn't so cut and dried anymore. That transition. Anyway, aside from that subject, I just had some other notes. And coming back to something far more simpler, but it's just like, I think I mentioned this before one time, where I used to have I just had the phone and the answering machine, and I would come back to the office and because I didn't want a cell phone, I said, hey, if I want to talk to them, they can call me and I'll call them back when I might want to talk to them, but I don't need to be on call all the time. So, but I would see whoever had left messages, and more often than not, I'd thought about that person probably about the same time they were calling and talking. And that happens to people, I think, all the time. Is, oh, I was just thinking about you the other day. Well, the odds are, if you could track it back, you would find that there was an effort at some level of communication. Either they couldn't reach them, or they really thought about them, or they were talking about them. Okay. And it crosses your mind. But more often than not, you just don't get a collaboration of that. Yeah. But you're out there and you're picking up information all the time, but then we never think much about that to give it any credibility. But it's happening. We're all part of it in some way. Some of your receivers are working.
I had written Troy this past week, our friend Troy, and I said, did you call your father? Because he needed to get some information for his chart for you. And I said, did you call your dad? And it was kind of just in the middle of the day. And he's like, I'm on the phone with him right now.
Yeah, it's that kind of thing happens a lot. You end up with the timing. And that's simply because rather than you just thinking, gee, I wonder if he called him, but didn't follow up on it, you were following up on it at that point. So you get that collaboration. A lot of times you would have, you just let the idea, gee, I wonder if he had called him, but you don't contact him. So you don't realize he's on the phone with him right now. But by the same token, you're picking up the fact that he is. And in your case, you had a reason for wanting to know. So there's enough of a driving interest. Yeah, that happens with me a lot.
Yeah.
That this happens or that happens, or,
Yeah.
kind of thing. And, oh, it's just like right now. Okay, well, I cut in the middle of whatever it was that was going on.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, I remember. I remember some people, a couple, And I didn't talk to him very often, but I would call every once in a while. Because, you know, every time you call, there's something major just happened in this household, you know, kind of thing. Event. So it happens. And probably the more you realize it happens, the more it becomes functional, maybe that's part of it too, is
I think part of that is
I'm looking through my notes.
realizing that it's happening and not necessarily writing it off as coincidence either. Because I think some people might have these types of things occur and they just look at it as, oh, it's just a sheer coincidence, nothing else.
Right,
But
because
the truth is that it's probably much more. There is some kind of line of communication occurring and people just don't want to, you know, because we've kind of been pre-programmed to not believe stuff like that as we grew up and things like that. So it's kind of like you have to open your mind and your heart to it to really be a receptor and understand what really is going on there.
yeah, and we certainly are not educated about these extrasensory perceptions that we have are just a part of our developmental cycle, because we've got all these sub-levels of development that are options. You know, we're not into that yet. And I can understand that. I mean, you know, it's not concrete enough to throw it into the realm of science and educate children about it until we've got a better sense of that happening. I'm just looking to see what one of the things too that on my notes is when these kinds of things happen, when we can talk about these levels of development that are there, and then you start to see them develop, then we can better understand, at least in relation to this material, that this stuff is real. You know, it doesn't, not everybody's developing at the same level, because they aren't. Not everybody's sensory perceptions are, they may be honing in on a given sense that gets developed more than any others. You know, obviously there's some people who must have a great sense of taste. They become wine tasters or something like that, because they really have a discriminating sense of taste, or someone else has a very discriminating sense of smell. Because I think if you take away the sight object, then those two senses are the hardest to describe what you're experiencing. If you especially taste, if people, because that's one of them that's not that developed for the most part. You take the visual item they're eating away and you start just giving them a taste with no visual, it's much harder to connect what you're really tasting, unless it's hot peppers, you know, or something like that. So, and smell, they're connected with the upper level. Those levels that are higher up on the chart. But so they don't develop evenly, is really what I'm saying. None of this stuff develops that evenly, in terms of you don't have an incarnation and work on this, and then the next time you work on that, and you know, it's not an ABC, it's a combination to level stuff out. Trying to see if there's anything else. My notes here. Oh, yeah, and along with this journey being real, is he will tell you, you don't get kooky as you go up the line. In fact, you get more rational and more sane. And actually, the fourth level is called the plane of pure reason. And that's an emotional based plane. So that ought to be a really good clue in terms of where you're headed. You know, is and the word logoic and the word logic aren't that far apart either. So the further up you go, the more logical things become. And the more rational and the more, I don't want to say predictable, I don't mean it quite that way, but it's the construction of it is nothing random about it at that point in time. The randomness is down in level 6 more than anything else, the astral plane, because of the fluidity, and there's no limiting structure there. All 7 planes just flow together. So so you just can be anything, you know, anything is possible there. You can turn around and talk to somebody about something and say, that is the way it is. Oh yeah, but it doesn't have to be that way. You know, and anything is possible at that, in that realm. So, but the farther up you go, the more rational you'll get. Probably the more sobering it gets in those realms. We're not, the "Oh happy days are here again" is probably not a song sung often. Moving on up. Anyway, any other questions or comments? Because I can go back to reading some more of this material, or we can discuss some of this. Quiet, quiet, quiet. So do you at least understand you're really walking around with an incredible piece of equipment, of which we've barely gotten past what we say scratched the surface in understanding what the capacity is?
Yeah, I think we're all well equipped. We just need to better know how to use that equipment. And as we move up, that'll mature.
Yes,
Right.
and and probably keep and determine whether we have an appreciation for wanting to develop that equipment.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, it really comes down to the individual deciding, you know, is this worthwhile? Is this within my range and focus? And do I want to do that? And do I see value in it? Not everybody would,
Right.
you know. But people who do feel value in it, then you got everything you need. You were born with it, and you're taking it with you when you die to come back next time and just keep on the journey.
Right.
But that's why I keep saying you're not your car, you're not your house. You don't need any of these to really do what was meant to be done here by us in terms of the journey.
Mhm.
You know, we got a lot of side trips, and a certain amount of what we do can be developmental and is utilized to develop the qualities that we have, so on and so forth. you know, it's not like we can erase that whole sector and not, and skip it, because we can't. But I would think the next Aquarian age will see a value in this, because they'll see a value probably in wanting to evolve. And no, it's just like we now know we're connected to this cosmos. Okay. The top 4 etheric levels in that chart are the bottom levels of other cosmic, which he talks about the 4. It's like with Sirius, he says freedom is one of the lowest aspects of Sirius, the planet, the star. So we get a little of it, and there's not a lot of freedom on this planet, let's face it.
Hmm.
And the freedom that's fought for is fought hard for by anybody who doesn't have it, who thinks they can get it. Okay. That's why it's the uniqueness of our Constitution, because it has accorded a space of this planet surface to be able to make this journey. Because there's a lot of places you could not make this journey. It's like one of my friends was talking, if you had a download of these books, you don't go to China with these on your computer because they're not going to let it in. You know, because that landmass is this journey is not of any accredited any value. In fact, it's just the reverse.
Mhm.
Okay. And so that's one of the big battles with our Constitution now, is do we change it and take away some of those rights in order to give everybody more rights, right? Isn't that the ideology of this? Is, you know, we're going to make it more equitable for everybody by taking away the Bill of Rights or the rights you have awarded in the Constitution. That is the thought pattern behind it, something to that effect. But the point is that this landmass has been accorded, given to the people who are born on it, the ability to pursue this path without it being in violation of somebody else's rights that are considered greater than your own. You know, be it government, be it a monarch, be it whatever, historically. So, but the point also being is that it's the lowest aspect of Sirius, of which we are connected to that system on this planet. You find that when you get more into your cosmic fire, so on and so forth, and that there are interactions there. And one of their lowest aspects is freedom. And so, and like I said, we don't have a lot of it on this planet. We have many, many things that bind us. It might be a government, it might be the thoughts of the people around you, you know, or all of this stuff. So we should value and the further up you get on this chart, the more freedom you will experience. And first of all, when you, at a certain point, you're going to be freedom from the form itself. You get up into that spiritual triad and you don't need a physical form. Your consciousness is still all there, but you just are not limited being grounded, so to speak. And that's basically what it is you're grounded in these bottom 3 layers up to a point where you work your way up to the soul itself, so that consciousness can be transferred, or whatever the word's going to be. But prior to that, you're grounded. Yeah. But you're certainly going to have a lot more freedom when you've passed that point. And you've been willing to, you have the option to, and are willing to give up the form. And that comes right before you go to level 4, because that's the 4th initiation. So, but that's a biggie, because if you don't have the freedom or the environment for it, and it's denied in that environment, then we know there's always a few who will continue to work with it in private or under secrecy or whatever it takes. But the majority of the people will just fold. Yeah. And follow the rules or the law, or what is verboten is verboten. So be glad we are where we are for the moment. Because just recently, in the last year and a half, I think the Chinese Communist Party has stated that they just want the science and the state. That's it. No religion. None of any of that crazy stuff or whatever it was that they determined that it was. In other words, that those are not permitted, and that it's just science. And ultimately, yeah, 1,500 years from now, science will do, because it's going to explain all this, and it incorporates your Christianity and your earlier religions, although the immediate focus will most likely be on this and the science behind it. But it will be our functioning, because we need that full interaction of functioning back and forth, of an exchange of consciousness between people, exchange of dialogue or interactions. You can't have everybody at odds with each other, and not, I won't say going to war. I don't mean it that, I won't go that extreme. I'll just say that you got warring factions everywhere you go. You know, you can't get along with these people, or there's a problem between those people, you know, stimulated or not, whatever it is. That is dysfunction. It's dysfunction for the planet. It's dysfunction for humanity. Consciousness doesn't grow in a positive direction with that. So, you know, we need to get away from that. But if you don't want growth, then you promote that dysfunction. If you want to hold people back. So I'm going to have one of the two of you pick up some conversation for a little bit. I'll be right back.